All right, question number 9. Compared to a well-sorted sample of larger sized particles, a well-sorted sample of smaller sized particles has greater what? Now, this question is all about groundwater and infiltration and water getting into the ground. So the immediate thing I'm going to do is get rid of this answer number 2, because transpiration is all about water going into the atmosphere from plants, from trees primarily. So that's out. We're talking about these 3 things here: capillarity, permeability, or porosity. Now, one thing I just wanted to point out to you is that these are both the same except for the size, larger and smaller. And if you recall, with porosity in particularly, porosity is pore space. And it really does not matter how big the particles are. If they're the same shape, the same sorting, they're going to have the same porosity, regardless of how big they are. So that one is actually out, because we're talking about having greater something. So get rid of porosity. So we're deciding between capillarity and permeability. Now, just to go back to this, permeability is the ability to get through. So in other words, if we have water here passing through this sample, it's got to weave its way in between the particles. Okay, now if those particles are really small, it's kind of hard to get through there because the gaps are really small. But if they're really big, then it can get through really easily because the gaps are bigger. Okay, now the opposite is capillarity. Capillarity is the ability to kind of stick to the sides of the sediment and work its way up against gravity, kind of the opposite of permeability. So if they're smaller, it's easier because there's a lot of surfaces to stick to. So we want a greater something. Now, if it's for the smaller size sediment, it's actually a greater capillarity because there's a lot of surfaces to stick to and it can kind of climb against gravity. It's not as permeable because it's hard to get through that smaller size sediment. So that's the answer to number 9.